my chapstick, and my chapstick is not in my car. Awesome. My lips are so chapped. I have no chapstick. Fun, fun, fun. Fun, fun, fun. I don't know what the fuck I did with my chapstick, if I'm being completely honest. Hello. Hold on. I'm trying to find my chapstick, and I can't because my lips. Thank you. It's from H&M. It's finally under like 75 degrees here in Texas, so I was able to put a sweater on, and I turned off my car finally, and I have the windows rolled down a little bit. It's finally not 1,000 degrees here in Texas. Jesus. Thank you. So I can wear a sweater, and I don't have to have my car on and have the AC blasting, and things are good again. I don't remember what I tabbed. Hold on. I haven't touched Empire of Storms in so long. Oh, it was just Lorcan in the lead. I haven't touched Empire of Storms in so long, so I'm excited to start today. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, okay. We're doing chapters 60 through 65 today. Okay. Okay, I know where we are now. All right. Okay, chapter 60. Aelin and Ansel clinked bottles of wine over the long, scarred table in the galley and drank deeply. They were to sail at first light tomorrow, back north, to Terrasen. Aelin braced her forearms on the slick table. Here's to dramatic entrances. Lysandra, curled on the bench in ghost leopard form with her head on Aelin's lap, let out a little feline laugh. Ansel blinked in wonder. So what now? It'd be nice, Adian grumbled from down the table where he and Rowan glared at them, to be included in just one of these schemes, Aelin. But your faces are so wonderful when I get to reveal them, Aelin crooned. He and Rowan growled. Oh, she knew they were pissed. So pissed that she hadn't told them about Ansel. But the thought of disappointing them, of failing, she'd wanted to do this on her own. Rowan apparently mastered his annoyance enough to ask Ansel, were the Ilkin or Valg not in Melisande? Are you implying my forces weren't good enough to take the city if they had been? Ansel swigged from her wine, laughter dancing in her eyes. Dorian sat at the table between Fenris and Gavriel, the three of them wisely keeping quiet. Lorcan and the lead were on the deck, somewhere. No, Prince, Ansel went on. I asked the Queen of Melisande about the lack of Morath bred horrors, and after some coaxing, she informed me that through whatever wiles and scheming, she'd managed to keep Erwin's claws from her and her soldiers. Aelin straightened a bit, wishing she'd had more wine than the third of a bottle she'd already consumed, as Ansel added, when this war is over, Melisande will not have the excuse of being in thrall to Erwin or to the Valg. Everything she and her armies have done, their choice in allying with him, was a human choice. A pointed glance to the darkest part of the galley, where Man and Blackbeak sat alone. At least Melisande will have the iron teeth to commiserate with. Manon's iron teeth flashed in the dim light. Her wyvern hadn't been spotted or heard from since he'd left, apparently, and she and Elide had talked for over an hour on the deck this afternoon. Aelin decided to do them all a favor and cut in. I need more men, Ansel, and I do not have the ability to be in so many places at once. They were all watching now. Ansel set down the bottle. You want me to raise another army for you? I want you to find me the lost Crochan witches. Manon jerked upright. What? Aelin scratched at a mark on the table. They're in hiding, but they're still out there. If the Iron Teeth hunt them, they might have significant numbers. Promise to share the wastes with them. You control Briarcliff and half the coast. Give them inland and the south. Manon was prowling over, death in her eyes. You do not have the right to promise such things. Rowan's and Adian's hands shot to their swords, but Lysandra opened a sleepy eye, stretched out a paw on the bench, and revealed the needle-sharp claws that now stood between Manon's shins and Aelin. Aelin said to Manon, "You cannot hold the land, not with the curse. Ansel won it, through blood and loss and her own wits. It is my home, my people's home. That was the asking price, wasn't it? The Iron Teeth get their homeland returned, and Arwen probably promised to break the curse." At Manon's wide eyes, Aelin snorted. "The ancients didn't tell you that, did they? Too bad. That's what Ansel's spies picked up." She looked the wing leader over. "If you and your people prove to be better than your matrons, there will be a place for you in that land, too." Manon just stalked back to her seat and glared at the galley's small brazier, as if she could freeze it over. Ansel murmured, "So touchy, these witches." Aelin clamped her lips together, but Lysandra let out another breathy cat laugh. Manon's nails clicked against each other from across the room. Lysandra merely answered with her own. Aelin said to Ansel, "Find the Crochans." "They're all gone," Manon cut in again. "We've hunted them to near extinction." Aelin slowly looked over her shoulder. "What if their queen summoned them? I am no more their queen than you are." "They'd see about that." Aelin laid a flat hand on the table. "Send anything and anyone you find north," she said to Ansel. "Sacking Melisandre's capital on the sly will at least piss off Arwen, but we don't want to be stuck down here when Terrasen is attacked." I think Arwen was probably born pissed. Only Ansel, who had once laughed at death as she leapt a ravine and convinced Aelin to nearly die doing the same, would mock a vowed king. But Ansel added, "I'll do it. I don't know how effective it'll be, but I'll have to go north anyway, though I think Hisley will be heartbroken to say farewell to Cassida once again." It was no surprise that all that Ansel had managed to hold on to Hisley, the Asterian male she'd stolen for herself. But Cassida was just as beautiful as Aelin remembered, even more so when she'd been led over a gangway onto the ship. Aelin had brushed the mare down when she'd led her into the cramped, wet stables and bribed the horse to forgive her with an apple. Ansel slugged from the bottle. "I heard, when you went to Endervere. I was still fighting my way onto the throne, battling Lord Locke's horde with the lords I'd banded together, but even out in the wastes, we heard when you were sent there, sorry." Aelin picked at the table some more, well aware the others were listening. It wasn't fun. Ansel nodded. "Once I'd killed Locke, I had to stay to defend my throne, to make it right again for my people. But I knew if anyone could survive Endervere, it'd be you. I set out last summer. I'd reached the Rune Mountains when I got word you were gone, taken to the capital by..." She glanced at Dorian, stone-faced across the table. "Him. But I couldn't go to Rifthold. It was too far, and I had been gone too long. So I turned around, went home." Aelin's words were strangled. "He tried to get me out?" The fire cast Ansel's hair in ruby and gold. "There was not 1 hour that I did not think about what I did in the desert. How you fired that arrow after 21 minutes. You told me 20. That you'd shoot even if I wasn't out of range. I was counting. I knew how many it had been. You gave me an extra minute." Lysandra stretched out, nuzzling Ansel's hand. She idly scratched the shifter. Aelin said, "You were my mirror. That extra minute was as much for me as it was for you." Aelin clinked her bottle against Ansel's again. "Thank you." Ansel just said, "Don't thank me yet." Aelin straightened. The others halted their eating, utensils discarded in their stew. "The fires along the coast weren't set by Arwen," Ansel said, those red-brown eyes flickering in the lantern light. "We interrogated Melisandre's queen and her lieutenants, but it wasn't an order from Morath." Adian's low growl told her they all knew the answer before Ansel replied. "We got a report that Fae soldiers were spies starting them, firing from ships." "Maeve," Gavriel murmured. "But burning isn't her style." "It's mine," Aelin said. They all looked at her. She let out a humorless laugh. Ansel just nodded. She'd been setting them, blaming you for it. "To what end?" Dorian asked, dragging a hand through his blue-black hair. To undermine Aelin, Rowan said. To make her look like a tyrant, not a savior. Like a threat worth banding against, rather than allying with. Aelin sucked on a tooth. Maeve plays the game well, I'll give her that. So she's reached these shores then, Adian said. But where the hell is she? A stone of fear plunked into Aelin's stomach. She couldn't bring herself to say north, to suggest that perhaps Maeve now sailed for an undefended Terrasen. A glance at Fenris and Gavriel revealed them already shaking their heads in silent answer to Rowan's pointed look. Aelin said, "We leave at first light." Okay. There's a lot going on right now. Okay. In the dim light of their private cabin an hour later, Rowan drew a line across the map, spread in the center of the floor. Then a second line beside it. Then a third line beside that. 3 lines, roughly spaced apart, broad swaths of the continent between them. Aelin, standing beside him, studied them. Rowan drew an inward arrow from the leftmost line toward the one in the center, and said quietly so the others in the adjacent rooms or hall couldn't hear. Fuck! I just spilled water on myself. Damn it. Ansel and her army hammer from the western mountains. Another arrow in an opposite direction, toward the line on the far right. Rolf, the Mycenaeans, and this armada strike from the eastern coast. An arrow pointing down into the right section of his little drawing, where the 2 arrows would meet. The Bane and the other half of Ansel's army sweep down to the center, from the Staghorns, to the heart of the continent, all converging on Morath. Those eyes were like green fire. "You've been moving armies into position." "I need more," she said, "and I need more time." His brows narrowed. "And what army will you be fighting in?" His mouth twitched up at the corner. "I assume I won't be able to persuade you to stay behind the lines. You know better than to even try." "Where would the fun be, anyway, if I got to win all the glory while you sat on your ass? I'd never let you hear the end of it." She snorted, and surveyed the other maps they'd spread across the floor of the cabin. Together they formed a patchwork of their world, not just the continent, but the lands beyond. She stood, towering over it as if she could spy those armies, both near and far. Rowan, still kneeling, looked upon the world spread at her feet. And she realized it indeed was. If she won this war, won the continent back. Aelin scanned the sprawl of the world, which had once seemed so vast and now, at her feet, seemed so fragile, so small and breakable. "You could, you know," Rowan said, his tattoo stark in the lantern light. "Take it for yourself. Take it all. Use Maeve's bullshit maneuvers against her. Make good on that promise." There was no judgment, only frank calculation and contemplation. "And would you join me if I did? If I turned a conqueror?" "You would unify, not pillage and burn. And yes, to whatever end." "That's the threat, isn't it?" she mused. "The other kingdoms and territories will spend the rest of their existence wondering if I will one day grow restless in Terrasen. They will do their best to ensure we stay happily within our borders and find them to be more useful as allies and trade partners than potential conquests. Maeve attacked Ilwi's coast, posing as me, perhaps to turn those foreign lands against me, to hammer home the point I made with my power at Skull's Bay, and use it against us." He nodded. "But if you could, would you?" For a heartbeat she could see it. See her face, carved into statues in kingdoms so far away they did not even know Terrasen existed. A living god, Mala's heir and conqueror of the known world. She would bring music and books and culture, wipe out the corruption festering in corners of the earth. She said softly, "Not now, but later. Perhaps if being queen bores me, I'll think about making myself empress, to give my offspring not one kingdom, but to inherit, but as many as the stars." There was no harm in saying it anyway, in thinking about it, stupid and useless as it was, even if wondering about the possibilities. Perhaps it made her no better than Maeve or Erwin. Rowan jerked his chin toward the nearest map, toward the wastes. "Why did you forgive Ansel, after what she did to you and the others in the desert?" Aelin crouched again. "Because she made a bad choice, trying to heal a wound she couldn't ever mend, trying to avenge the people she loved. And you really set all this in motion when you were in Rifthold, when you were fighting in those pits. She gave him a roguish wink. I knew if I gave the name Ansel of Briarcliff, it'd somehow make its way to her that a red-haired young woman was using her name to slaughter trained soldiers in the pits, and that she'd know it was me. So, the red hair back then, not just for Arobynn, not even close. Damn! This bitch is thinking miles and miles and miles ahead of where we are. I can't even see her vision when she's like, she's so far ahead of everyone else. Like, exactly. We're playing checkers. This bitch is playing chess. Like, she is in it to win it. I love her. Aelin frowned at the maps, dissatisfied she hadn't spotted any other armies hiding out around the world. Rowan dragged a hand through his hair. Sometimes I wish I knew every thought in that head, every scheme and plot. Then I remember how much it delights me when you reveal it, usually when it's most likely to make my heart stop dead in my chest. I knew you were a sadist. He kissed her mouth once, twice, then the tip of her nose, nipping it with his canines. She hissed and batted him away, and his deep chuckle rumbled against the wooden walls. That's for not telling me, he said, again. But despite his words, despite everything, he looked so happy, so perfectly content and happy to be there, kneeling among those maps, the lantern down to its last dregs, the world going to hell. The joyless, cold male she'd first met, the one who had been waiting for an opponent good enough to bring him death. He now looked at her with happiness in his face. She took his hand, gripping it hard. Rowan. The spark died from his eyes. She squeezed his fingers. Rowan, I need you to do something for me. Manon laid, curled on her side in her narrow bed, unable to sleep. It was not from the piss-poor sleeping conditions. No, she'd slept in far worse, even considering the shoddily patched hole in the side of the wall. She stared at the gap in the wall, at the moonlight leaking in on the salty summer breeze. She would not go find the Crochids. No matter what the Terrasen Queen called her, admitting to her bloodline was different from claiming it. She doubted the Crochans would be willing to serve her anyway, given that she'd killed their princess, her own half-sister. And even if the Crochans did choose to serve her, fight for her, Manon put a hand to the thick scar now across her belly. The iron teeth would not share the wastes. But it was that mentality, she supposed, as she twisted onto her back, peeling her hair from her sweat-sticky neck, that had sent them all into exile. She again peered through the gaps in the hull to the sea beyond, waiting to spot a shadow in the night sky, to hear the boom of mighty wings. Abraxas should have been here already. She shut out the coiling dread in her stomach. But instead of wings, footsteps creaked in the hall outside. A heartbeat later, the door opened on near-silent hinges, then shut again, locked. Manon didn't sit up as she said, "What are you doing here?" The moonlight sifted through the king's blue-black hair. "You don't have chains anymore." She sat up at that, examining where the irons draped down the wall. Is it more enticing for you if they're on? Sapphire eyes seemed to glow in the dark as he leaned against the shut door. "Sometimes it is," she snorted, but found herself saying, "You never weighed in." "On what?" he asked, though he knew what she'd meant. "What I am? Who I am? Does my opinion matter to you, witchling?" Manon stalked toward him, stopping a few feet away, aware of every inch of night between them. "You don't seem outraged that Aelin sacked Melisande without telling anyone. You don't seem to care that I am a Crochan. Don't mistake my silence for lack of feeling. I've good reason to keep my thoughts to myself." Ice glittered at his fingertips. Manon tracked it. "Will it be you or the Queen against Arwen in the end, I wonder? Fire against darkness makes for a better story." "Yes, but so would ripping a Demon King to shreds without using your hands." A half smile. "I can think of better use." This dude. I can think of better uses for my hands, invisible in flesh. An invitation and a question. She held his gaze. "And finish what you started," Manon breathed. Dorian's answering smile was soft, edged with that glimmer of cruelty that made her blood heat as if the Fire Queen herself had breathed flame into it. She let Dorian back her against the wall. Let him hold her gaze while he tugged the top laces of her white shirt free, one by one. Let him lean in to brush his mouth against her bare neck. Okay, we're getting into a territory that I can't read. I did not think we were going to get into the reds today. Then he pulled back. What? Away. Even as those phantom hands continued to... Oh, okay, never mind. His mouth parted slightly, body trembling with restraint. Restraint where most males took when she offered it, gorging themselves on her. But Dorian Havillard said, the bloodhound was lying that night. When she said about what she said about your second, I felt her lie. Tasted it. Wait. But if she's not dead, where the fuck is she? I told y'all she wasn't dead. I literally said she can't, like, all of that can't be for nothing. What the fuck? But how did she know about this scar on her tongue? How did she get her banned? What the fuck? Some tight part in her chest eased. I don't want to talk about that. He stepped closer again, and those phantom hands trailed under her breath. I didn't say it, TikTok. I didn't say it. She gritted her teeth. And what do you want to talk about, Manon? She wasn't sure he'd ever said her name before, and the way he'd said it. I don't want to talk at all, she countered. And neither do you, she added with a pointed glance. Again, that dark, edged smile appeared, and when he stepped close once more, his hands replaced those phantom ones. Oh my God. You once asked me where I stand on the line between killing to protect and killing for pleasure. His fingers grazed the seam of the scar across her abdomen. I'll stand on the other side of the line when I find your grandmother. Damn. Damn. Oh my God. Hold on. Oh my God. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I'm folding. I'm folding. Hold on. Hold on. I feel like it's an appropriate time. I feel like this is an appropriate time to put these on. These are my new red moment glasses, so we'll have these on while I'm reading stuff I can't read out loud on TikTok. Oh my my God. This was supposed to take the edge off. I think it's over. She kept her words low as his clothes slid over, held by phantom hands. And did it? He traced her lower lip with his thumb and shuddered as okay. No, not even close. But that was the gray light of dawn creeping into the room, staining the walls silver. He seemed to notice it at the same moment she did. Groaning softly, he pulled himself off of her. She tugged on her clothes with trained efficiency, and only when she was lacing up her shirt did Dorian say, "We're not done, you and I." And it was the purely male promise that made her bare her teeth. "Unless you would like to learn precisely what parts of me are made of iron the next time you touch me, I decide those things." Dorian gave another purely male smile, brows flicking up, and sauntered out the door as silently as he'd arrived. He only seemed to pause on the threshold, as if some word had snagged his interest, but he continued out, the door closing with barely a click, unruffled, utterly calm. Manon gaped after him, cursing her blood for heating again for what she'd allowed him to do. She wondered what Dorian would say if she told him she had never allowed a male to top her like that, not once. Wondered what he'd say if she told him she'd wanted to sink her. Okay. Manon dragged her hands through her hair and slumped onto the pillow. Darkness embraced her. She sent a silent prayer for Abraxas to return soon. Too much time. She'd spent too much damn time among these humans and fey males. She needed to leave. Elide was safe here. The Queen of Terrasen might be many things, but Manon knew she'd protect Elide. But with the 13 scattered and likely dead, regardless of what Dorian had claimed, Manon wasn't entirely sure where to go when she left. The world had never seemed quite so vast before, and so empty. Utterly exhausted, Elide barely... They're back! Elide barely slept during the long night she and Lorcan swayed in hammocks with the other sailors. The smells, the sounds, the rocking of the sea, all of it nagged. None of it left her settled. A finger seemed to keep prodding her awake, as if telling her to be alert, but there was nothing. Lorcan tossed and turned for hours, as if the same force begged him to wake, as if he was waiting for something. His strength had been flagging by the time they'd reached the ship, though he had showed no signs of strain before, beyond a slight tightening in his mouth. But Elide knew he was near what he described as a burnout. Knew because, for hours afterward, the small brace of magic around her ankle kept flickering in and out of place. After Manon had informed her of the uncertain fates of the 13, Elide had kept mostly out of her companion's way, letting them talk with that red-haired young woman who found them on the beach. So had Lorcan. He'd listened to them debate and plan, his face taut, as if something coiled in him, wound itself tighter with every passing moment. Watching him sleep mere feet away, that harsh face smoothed to softness by slumber, a small part of Elide wondered if she'd somehow brought another danger to the Queen. She wondered if the others had noted how often Lorcan's gaze had been fixed on Aylin's back, aimed at her back. As if sensing her attention, Lorcan opened his eyes, met her stare without so much as blinking. For a heartbeat she took in that depthless gaze mere feet away, made ethereal by the silver light before dawn. He had been willing to offer up his life for her own. Something softened in that harsh face. As his eyes dipped to where her arm dangled out of her hammock, the skin still a bit sore, but miraculously healed. She'd thanked Gavriel twice now, but he brushed it aside with a gentle nod and shrug. A faint smile bloomed on Lorcan's... Oh my god! A faint smile bloomed on Lorcan's harsh mouth as he reached across the space between them and ran his calloused fingers down her arm. "You choose this?" he murmured, so that it was a little more than the groaning of the hammock ropes. He brushed a thumb down her palm. Elide swallowed but let herself take in every line of that face. North. They were going home today. "I thought that was obvious," she said with equal quiet, her cheeks heating. His fingers laced through hers. "I'm gonna rip my hair out. I'm gonna rip my hair out. I'm gonna..." Okay. Shh, it's okay. His fingers laced through hers, some emotion she couldn't place flickering like starlight in those black eyes. "We need to talk." "No!" he rasped. It was the shout of the watch that jolted them, the one of pure terror. Elide nearly flipped out of her hammock, the sailors rushing past. By the time she shoved her hair from her eyes, Lorcan was already gone. The various decks were packed, and she had to limp onto the stairs to view what had roused them. The other ships were awake and frenzied, with good reason. Sailing over the western horizon, another armada headed for them. And Elide knew in her bones it was not one that Aelin had schemed and planned for. Not as Fenris breathed, suddenly beside her on the steps. "Maeve." I will agree with that. The way I picture Lorcan is not how people draw him. But that's okay because it's how I picture him. And the way I picture him is like, I'll admit, the first time that I was picturing Lorcan, I pictured him as like an old man. Not an old man, but just like not in it, because he was like a villain, and I usually picture villains like kind of ugly. That's just how I feel in the moment. And so when he was first introduced, he was kind of an ass, so I pictured him a little ugly. And then when him and Elide started interacting, and I was like, okay, he's not a villain, so like I had to like reimagine him in my mind. And now the way I picture him, he's ooh. Oh yeah. Okay, but whenever they were describing Arobynn, I didn't think of Arobynn as attractive until I saw his fan art. Like, I had to change how I thought of Arobynn when I saw the fan art. Like, after I saw Arobynn's fan art, I was like, shit. Lord Mazeen, yeah, Lord Mazeen, I did picture as hot too. Okay, so maybe not every villain, but like a lot of the villains I picture as like not cute. Like, I picture them ugly. It was for 2 seconds. Y'all will never let me live that down. I should have kept my mouth closed. Y'all will never let me live that down. It was a momentary lapse of judgment, and I regret it. And now we're moving on. Chapter 61. They had no choice but to meet them. Maeve's armada had the wind and the current, and they would not even reach the shore before they were caught. And outrunning Fae soldiers, not an option. Rowan and Aedion laid out every course for Aelin. All paths arrived at one destination: confrontation. And she was still so drained, so exhausted, that she knew how this would go. Maeve had a third more ships, and immortal warriors with magic. It took far too little time for those black sails to fill the sky, for them to glean that their enemies' boats were better made, their soldiers longer trained. Rowan and the Cadre had overseen much of that training, and the details they provided were not heartening. Maeve sent one ornately carved rowboat to them, bearing a message: surrender or be sent to the bottom of the ocean. Aelin had until dawn tomorrow to decide. An entire day, so that the fear would fester and spread among their men. Aelin met with Rowan and Aedion again. The Cadre was not summoned by their queen, though Lorcan paced like a caged beast, Elide watching with a face that impressively revealed nothing. She had no solution. Dorian remained quiet, though he often glanced between her and Manon, as if some puzzle were laid before him. He never said what. Aedion pushed for attacking, quietly rallying the boats and attacking, but Maeve would see that maneuver coming, and they could strike faster with magic than it'd take for them to fire arrows and harpoons. Time. That was all she had to play with. They debated and theorized and planned. Rowan made a decent attempt at trying to suggest she run, She let him talk, only to let him realize in doing so what a stupid idea it was. After last night, he should be well aware she was not leaving him, not willingly. So the sun set, and Maeve's armada waited, poised and watching, a lounging panther ready to strike at first light. Time, her only tool, and her downfall, and she had run out of it. Aelin counted those black sails again and again as night blanketed them, and had no idea what to do. It was unacceptable, Rowan had decided during the long hours they debated. Unacceptable that they had done so much only to be halted not by Erwin, but Maeve. She hadn't deigned to make an appearance, but that wasn't her style. She'd do it at dawn, accept Aelin's surrender in person, with all eyes watching, and then... Rowan didn't know what she'd do then, what Maeve wanted, other than the keys. Aelin had been so calm. Shock, he realized. Aelin had gone into shock. Rowan had seen her rage and kill and laugh and weep, but he had never seen her lost. And he hated himself for it, but he couldn't find a way out. Couldn't find a way for her to get out of this. Aelin was sleeping soundly as Rowan stared at the ceiling above their bed, then slid his gaze over her. He took in the lines of her face, the golden waves of her hair, every moon-white scar and dark swirl of ink. Leaning in, silent as snow in a wood, he kissed her brow. He would not let it end here, not let this be what broke them. He knew the house flags that flew beneath Maeve's own crest, had counted and catalogued them all day, sorting through the catacombs of his memory. Rowan slid into his clothes and waited until he'd crept into the hall before buckling his sword belt. Still gripping the doorknob, he allowed himself one last look at her. What is he gonna do? What is he gonna do? For a moment, the past snared him. For a moment, he saw her as he'd first spied her on the rooftops of Varese, drunk and battered. He'd been in hawk form, assessing his new charge, and she'd noticed him. Broken and reeling, she had still spotted him there, and stuck out her tongue at him. If someone had told him that the drunken, brawling, bitter woman would become the one thing he could not live without. Rowan shut the door. This was all he could offer her. Rowan reached the main deck and shifted, little more than a gleam of moonlight as he shielded himself and flapped through the briny night into the heart of Maeve's fleet. What is he doing? What is he doing? Why can't they all just die together? Rowan's cousin had enough good sense not to try to kill him on sight. They were close enough in age that Rowan had grown up with him, raised in his uncle's house beside him after his parents had faded. If his uncle ever faded, it would be Enda who took up the mantle as head of their house, a prince of considerable title, property, and arms. Enda, to his credit, sensed his arrival before Rowan slipped through the flimsy shields on the windows. And Enda remained sitting on the bed, albeit dressed for a battle, a hand on his sword. His cousin looked him over head to toe as Rowan shifted. Assassin or messenger prince? Neither, Rowan said, inclining his head slightly. Like him, Enda was silver-haired, though his green eyes were speckled with brown that could sometimes swallow the color whole when he was in a rage. If Rowan had been bred and built for battlefields, Enda was sculpted for intrigue and I don't know how to say that word, sorry. His cousin, while tall and muscled enough, lacked Rowan's breadth of shoulders and solid bulk, though that could also be from the different sorts of training they'd received. Enda knew enough about fighting to warrant being here, to lead his father's forces, but their own educations had crossed little after those first decades of youth, when they had run wild together at his family's main estate. Enda kept his hand on the hilt of his fine sword, utterly calm. "You look different," his cousin said, brows twitching toward each other. "Better." There had been a time when Enda had been his friend, before Lyria, before everything, and Rowan might have been inclined to explain who and what was responsible for this change, but he didn't have time. No, time was not his ally this night. But Rowan said, "You look different as well, Prince." Enda gave a half-smile. "You can thank my mate for that." Once it might have sent a pang of agony through him. That Enda spoke of it reminded him that his cousin might not be a battle-honed warrior, but the courtier was as good as any at marking important details, noting Aelin's scent, now forever entwined with his own. So Rowan nodded, smiling a bit himself. It was Lord Carrington's son, wasn't it? Indeed, there was another scent woven through Enda's, the claiming deep and true. It was. Enda again smiled, now at a ring on his finger. We were mated and married earlier this summer. You mean to tell me you waited 100 years for him? Enda shrugged, his grip on his sword lightening. When it comes to the right person, Prince, waiting 100 years is worth it. He knew. He understood him so damn well that it made his chest crack to think of it. Endymion? Okay, he said hoarsely. Enda, I need you to listen. There were plenty of people who might have called for the guards, but he knew Enda, or had. He was but one of several cousins who'd shoved their noses into his business for years. Tried, Rowan now wondered, not for gossip, but to fight to keep some small scrap of him alive. Enda more than any of them. So Endymion? Yeah, so Endymion gave him the gift of listening. Rowan tried to keep it concise, tried to keep his hands from trembling. In the end, he supposed his request was simple. When he finished, Enda studied him, any response hidden behind that court-trained mask of neutrality. Then Enda said, I'll consider it. It was the best Rowan could hope for. He said nothing else to his cousin before he shifted again and flapped into the night, toward another banner he had once marched beside. And ship to ship Rowan went, the same speech, the same request. All of them, all his cousins had the same answer. I'll consider it. What the fuck? Chapter 62. Manon was awake when Dorian stormed into her room an hour before dawn. He ignored her unlaced shirt and and said, Put your clothes on and follow me. Mercifully, the witch obeyed, though he had a feeling it was mostly from curiosity. When he reached Aylin's chamber, he bothered to knock, just in case the Queen and Rowan were utilizing their potentially last few hours together. But the Queen was already awake and dressed, the prince nowhere to be found. Aylin took one look at Dorian's face. What is it? He didn't tell either woman anything as he led them down into the cargo hold, the upper levels of the ship already astir with battle preparations. While they debated and readied for the past day, he'd contemplated Manon's warning, after she'd made his very blood sing with pleasure. Oh. Unless you would like to learn precisely what parts of me are made of iron the next time you touch me, I decide those things. Over and over he'd considered the way the words had snagged on a sharp corner of memory. He'd lain awake all night while he descended into his still depleted well of magic, and as the light had begun to shift, Dorian tugged the sheet off the witch mirror, carefully held in place against the wall. The lock, or whatever it was, and the muted reflection, the two queens were frowning at his back. Manon's iron nail slid out. I would be careful in handling that if I were you. The warning is noted and appreciated, he said, meeting those gold eyes in the mirror. She didn't return his smile. Neither did Aylin. He sighed. I don't think this witch mirror has any power. Or rather, not a tangible, brute power. I think its power is knowledge. Aylin's steps were near silent as she approached. I was told the lock would allow me to bind the 3 keys into the gate. You think this mirror knows how to do that? He simply nodded, trying not to be too offended by the skepticism scrunching her face. Aylin picked at a loose thread on her jacket. But what does the lock mirror, whatever it is, have to do with the Armada breathing down our necks? He tried not to roll his eyes. It has to do with what Deanna said. What if the lock wasn't just for binding them back into the gate, but a tool for safely controlling the keys? Aylin frowned at the mirror. So I'm going to lug that thing onto the deck and use it to blow apart Maeve's Armada with the 2 keys we have? He took a steadying breath, beseeching the gods for patience. I said, I think the mirror's power is knowledge. I think it will show you how to wield the keys safely, so you can come back here and wield them without consequence. A slow blink. What do you mean, come back here? I thought two people were fighting. Sorry, I thought two people were fighting. They're just being idiots. Manon answered, now stepping close as she studied the mirror. It's a traveling mirror. Dorian nodded. Think about Deannan's words. Flame and iron together bound, merge into silver to learn what must be found. A mere step is all it shall take. He pointed to the mirror. Step into the silver and learn. Manon clicked her tongue. And I suppose she and I are flame and iron. Aelin crossed her arms. Dorian cut the Queen of Terrasen a wry glance. People other than you can solve things, you know. Aelin glared at him. We don't have time for what-ifs. Too many things could go wrong. You have little magic left, Dorian countered, waving a hand toward the mirror. You could be in and out of this mirror before dawn, and use what you learned to send Maeve a message in no uncertain terms. I can still fight with steel, without the risks and waste of time. You can stop this battle before the losses are too great on either side, he added carefully. We're out of time already, Aelin. Those turquoise eyes were steady. If not still furious, he'd beat her to the riddle, but something flickered in them. I know, she said. I was hoping, she shook her head, more at herself. I ran out of time, she murmured as if it were an answer, and considered the mirror, then Manon, then blew out a breath. This wasn't my plan. I know, Dorian said with a half-smile. That's why you don't like it. Manon asked before Aelin could bite off his head. But where will the mirror lead? Aelin clenched her jaw. Hopefully not Morath. Dorian tensed. Perhaps this plan, that symbol belongs to both of us, Manon said, studying the eye of Elena etched onto it. And if it takes you to Morath, you're going to need someone who knows the way out. Steps thudded down the stairs. At the back of the hold, Dorian twisted toward them, but Aelin smirked at Manon and approached the mirror. Then I'll see you on the other side, witch. Adian's golden head appeared between the crates. What the hell are you? Aelin's shallow nod seemed all that Manon needed. She placed her hand atop Aelin's. Golden eyes met Dorian's for a moment, and he opened his mouth to say something to her, the words surging from some barren field in his chest. But Aelin and Manon pressed their joined hands to the speckled glass. Adian's shout of warning rang through the hold as they vanished. Damn. What's going on? Chapter 63. I don't know what's happening. I don't even know what to expect at this point. I'm so lost. Alid watched the ship rally against the armada looming before them, then descend into utter chaos as Adian began roaring below. The news came out moments later. Came out as Prince Rowan Whitethorn landed on the main deck, face haggard, eyes full of nothing but fear as Adian burst out the door, Dorian on his heels, sporting an already nasty bruise around his eye. He touched my husband? He touched my husband? Pacing, seething, Adian told them of Aelin and Manon walking into the mirror, the lock, and vanishing. How the King of Ardalan had solved Deanna's riddle and sent them into its silvery realm to buy them a shot at this battle. They went down into the cargo hold, but no matter how Adian pushed against the mirror, it did not open to him. No matter how Rowan searched it with his magic, it did not yield where Aelin and Manon had gone. Adian had spat on the floor, looking inclined to give the king another black eye, as Dorian explained there had been little choice. He hadn't seemed sorry about it, until Rowan refused to meet his gaze. Only when they were gathered on the deck again, the king and shapeshifter speaking to the captain about the turn of events, did Alid carefully say to Adian as he paced, "What's done is done. We can't wait for Aelin and Manon to find a way to save us." Adian halted, and Alid tried not to cringe at the unrelenting fury as it narrowed on her. "When I want your opinion about how to deal with my missing queen, I'll ask you." Lorcan snarled at him. Oh, that's my man, defending his woman. But Alid lifted her chin, even as the insult hit something in her chest. I waited as long as you did to find her again, Adian. You are not the only one who fears to lose her once more. Indeed, Rowan Whitethorn now rubbed his face. She suspected it was as much feeling as the Fey Prince would show. Rowan lowered his hands, the others watching him, waiting for his orders. Even Adian. The lead started as realization slapped her, as she searched for proof but found none. We continue readying for battle, Rowan said hoarsely. He looked to Lorcan, then Fenris and Gavriel, and his entire countenance changed, his shoulders pushing back, his eyes turning hard and calculating. There's not a chance in hell Maeve doesn't know you're here. She'll wield the blood oath when it'll hurt us the most. Maeve. Some small part of her wished to see the queen who could command Lorcan's relentless focus and attention for so many centuries, and perhaps give Maeve a piece of her mind. Fenris put a hand on the hilt of his sword and said, with more quiet than Elide had witnessed so far, I don't know how to play this one. Indeed, Gavriel seemed at a loss, scanning his tattooed hands as if the answer lay there. It was Lorcan who said, If you're spotted fighting on this side, it's over. She'll either kill you both or make you regret it in other ways. And what about you? Fenris challenged. Lorcan's eyes slid to hers, then back to the males before them. It was over for me months ago. It's now a matter of waiting to see what she'll do about it. If she'd kill him, or drag him back in chains. The lead's stomach turned, and she avoided the urge to grab his hand, to beg him to run. She'll see that we've worked our way around her order to kill you, Gavriel said. If fighting on this side of the line doesn't damn us enough, then that surely will. It likely already has. Dawn's still half an hour off if you two want to start. Dawn's still half an hour off. If you two want to try again, Lorcan crooned. Elide tensed, but it was Fenris who said, It's all a ploy. Elide held her breath as he surveyed the Fey males, his companions, to fracture us when Maeve knows that, unified, we could present a considerable threat. We'd never turn on her, Gavriel countered. No, Fenris said, but we would offer that strength to another. And he looked at Rowan as he said, When we got your call for aid this spring, when you asked us to come defend Mistward, we left before Maeve could get wind of it. We ran. That's enough, Lorcan growled, but Fenris went on, holding Rowan's steady gaze. When we returned, Maeve whipped us within an inch of our lives, tied Lorcan to the post for 2 days, and let Kareen whip him whenever he wished. Lorcan ordered us not to tell you, for whatever reason, but I think Maeve saw what we did together in Mistward and realized how dangerous we could be, to her. Rowan didn't hide the devastation in his eyes as he faced Lorcan, devastation that Elide felt echo in her own heart. Lorcan had endured that, and still remained loyal to Maeve. Elide brushed her fingers against his. The motion didn't go unnoticed by the others, but they wisely kept quiet about it, especially as Lorcan dragged his thumb down. I'm gonna be sick to my fucking stomach. I'm gonna be sick to my fucking stomach. I'm gonna be sick to my stomach if anything happens to them. Especially as Lorcan dragged his thumb down the back of her hand in answer. And Elide wondered if Rowan also understood that Lorcan hadn't ordered their silence for strategy, but perhaps to spare the prince from guilt, from wanting to retaliate against Maeve in a way that would surely harm him. Did you know, Rowan said hoarsely to Lorcan, that she'd punish you before you came to Mistward? Lorcan held the prince's stare. We all knew what the cost would be. Rowan's throat bobbed, and he took a long breath, his eyes darting toward the stairs, as if Aelin would come prowling out, salvation in hand. Sorry, my phone is dying. But she didn't, and Elide prayed to that wherever the queen now was, she was gleaning what they so desperately needed to learn. Rowan said to his companions, You know how this battle will likely end. Even if our armada teemed with Fey soldiers, we'd still have the odds stacked against us. The sky began to bleed with pink and purple as the sun stirred beneath the distant waves. Gavriel only said, We have had the odds stacked against us before. A glance at Fenris, who nodded gravely. We'll stay until we are commanded otherwise. It was to Adian that Gavriel looked as he said this last piece. There was something in the general's Ash River eyes that looked almost like gratitude. Elide sensed Lorcan's attention and found him still watching her as he said to Rowan. Elide gets... Oh, shut the fuck up. I can't... I didn't... Elide gets to shore under a guard of whatever men you can spare. My sword is yours only if you do that. I can't do this. Y'all, I can't do this. I can't. What am I... Y'all. Elide started, but Rowan said, "Done." I can't. I'm about to start crying. I have the same feeling in my chest that I did before I read Sam's death. I always get, and I think, oh, something's in my hair, hold on. Oh, it's a piece of fuzz. I normally have anxiety whenever I read books. Like, it's a given that it's a given that I get anxiety when I am reading, like, when something is too good, or, you know, the typical anxiety. There is a specific type of anxiety that I get, though, that usually comes before something really bad happens. Really bad. And it's the same anxiety that I got whenever I was about to read Sam's death. Or, you know, and it's the same one that I got before I read The Song of Achilles. So I feel like I'm about to throw up. Honestly, I do. I feel like I'm about to throw up. I'm not feeling good right now. Okay. I just wanted to get that out there in case something actually is going to happen, and then I can be like, I'm validated in my intuition. But I don't want to be validated. I don't want to be validated at all. Rowan spread them across the fleet, each given command of a few ships. He stationed Fenris, Lorcan, and Gavriel on ships toward the center and back, farthest away from Maeve's notice. He and Adian took the front lines, with Dorian and Ansel commanding the line of ships behind his. Lysandra was already beneath the waves in sea dragon form, ready for his order to do damage to hull and prow and rudder on ships he'd marked for her. He'd bet that while the Fae ships might have shields around them, they wouldn't waste valuable reservoirs of power on shielding below the surface, and Lysandra would strike quick and hard, gone before they could realize who and what had wrecked them from below. Dawn broke, clear and bright, staining the sails with gold. Rowan did not let himself think of Aelin, or of wherever she might be. Minute after minute passed, and still Aelin did not return. A small oak rowboat slid out from Maeve's fleet and headed for him. There were only 3 people on it, none of them Maeve. He could feel thousands of eyes on either side of that too narrow band of empty water between their armadas, watching that boat approach, watching him. A male in Maeve's livery, stood with preternatural Fae balance as the oarsman held the boat steady. Her Majesty waits your reply. Rowan tunneled into his depleted reserve of power, keeping his face bland, and for of Maeve that Aelin Galathinius is no longer present to give a reply. A blink from the male was all the shock he'd show. Maeve's creatures were too well trained, too aware of the punishment for revealing her secrets. Princess Aelin Galathinius is ordered to surrender, the male said. Queen Aelin Galathinius is not on this ship, or any other in this fleet. She is, in fact, not on the shore or in any nearby lands, so Maeve will find she came a long way for nothing. We will leave your armada in peace if you will grant us the same courtesy." The male sneered up at him, spoken like cowards who know they're outnumbered, spoken like a traitor. Rowan gave the male a small smile. Let's see what Maeve has to say now. The male spat into the water, but the ship rode back into the embrace of the armada. For a moment, Rowan recalled his last words to Dorian before he'd sent the king to shield his own line of ships. They were beyond apologies. Aelin would either return or he didn't let himself consider the alternative. But they could buy her as much time as possible, try to fight their way out for her and the future of this armada. Dorian's face had revealed the same thoughts as he clasped his hands with him and said quietly, "It's not such a hard thing, is it? To die for your friends." Rowan didn't bother insisting they were going to live through this. The king had been tutored in warfare, even if he hadn't yet practiced it. So Rowan had given him a grim smile and replied, "No, it's not." The words echoed through him again as the messenger's boat disappeared, and for whatever good it would do, whatever time it would buy them, Rowan reinforced his shields again. The sun had fully risen over the horizon when Maeve's reply came. Not a messenger in a longboat, but a barrage of arrows, so that they blotted out the light as they arched across the sky. "Shield," Rowan bellowed, not only at the magic wielders, but also at the armed men who raised their dented and battered shields above them as arrows rained across the line. The arrows struck, and his magic buckled under their onslaught. Their tips had been warped in magic of their own, and Rowan gritted his teeth against it. On other ships, where the shield was stretched thin, some men screamed. Maeve's armada began crawling toward them. I didn't think that I was going to be reading a stressful chapter today, if I'm being completely honest. I was not expecting this to be stressful. I don't even think it's about whether I want to finish today. It's about whether I'll have the light to finish today. It's very cloudy. It was raining. I would finish today, but yeah, I was gonna say I don't think I'll be able to find a good stopping point either. Okay, no, that's fine. We can just read through 65 today, and then I'll go live tomorrow, and I'll finish it tomorrow. Fuck. I have a feeling I'm gonna need my hoodie tomorrow, so I will bring it just in case. Chapter 64. Aelin had a body that was not a body. She knew only because in this void, this foggy twilight, Manon had a body, a near transparent, wraith-like body, but a form nonetheless. Manon's teeth and nails glinted in the dim light as she surveyed the swirling gray mists. What is this place? The mirror had transported them to, wherever this was. Your guess is as good as mine, witch. Had time stopped beyond the mists? Had Maeve held her fire upon learning she was not present, or attacked anyway? Aelin had no doubt Rowan would hold the lines for as long as possible, had no doubt he and Adian would lead them, but whether the witch mirror was the lock she'd sought, she'd expected it to have some immediate reaction to the 2 word cage she'd snuck into her jacket. Not this. Not absolutely nothing. Aelin drew Goldrin. In the mist, the sword's ruby flickered. The only color, only light. Manon said, "We stick close. We only speak when necessary." Aelin was inclined to agree. There was solid ground beneath them, but the mist hid their feet, hid any inkling that they stood on dirt beyond a faint, crumbling scraping. "Any guess which way?" Aelin murmured, but they didn't have to decide. The eddying fog darkened, and Manon and Aelin stepped close together, back to back. Pure night swept around them, blinding them. Then, a murky, dim light ahead. No, not ahead. Approaching them. Manon's bony shoulder dug into her own as she pressed tighter together, an impenetrable wall. But the light rippled and expanded, figures within it appearing, solidifying. Aelin knew 3 things as the light and color enveloped them and became tangible. They were not seen or heard or scented by those before them. This was the past, 1,000 years ago to be exact, and that was Elena Galathynius on her knees in a black, barren mountain pass, blood dripping from her nose, tears sliding through the dirt, crusting her face to splatter on her armor, an obsidian sarcophagus somehow stationed before her. All across the sarcophagus, word marks simmered with pale blue fire, and in the center of it, the Eye of Elena, the amulet held within the stone itself, its pale gold unvarnished and gleaming. Then, as if a phantom breath blew over it, the eye dimmed, along with the word marks. Elena reached with a trembling hand to twist the eye, rotating it thrice in the black stone. The eye clicked and tumbled into Elena's awaiting hand, sealing the sarcophagus, locking it. "You've had the lock all along," Manon murmured. "But then the mirror, I think," Aelin breathed. "We've been deliberately misled about what we must retrieve." "Why?" Manon said with equal quiet. "I suppose we're about to find out. A memory. That's what this was. But what was so vital that they had been sent to retrieve it when the whole damn world was falling apart around them?" Aelin and Manon stood in silence as the scene unfolded, as the truth, at last the truth, now wove together. What the fuck is going on? The fuck is going on? Chapter 65. Dawn at the Obsidian Passes. The lock had crafted the sarcophagus from the mountain itself. It had taken every ember of its power to bind Erwin within the stone, to seal him inside. She could feel the Dark King sleeping within, hear the shrieks of his fell army feasting on human flesh in the valley far below. How long would they continue fighting when word spread that Erwin had fallen? She wasn't foolish enough to hope her companions had survived the slaughter. Not this long. On her knees in the sharp black rock, Elena gazed at the obsidian sarcophagus, the symbols carved into it. They initially had been glowing, but had now faded and cooled, settled into place. Fuck! Sorry, my phone is dying, but I have to turn my car on to charge it, so goodbye to my windows being rolled down. Actually, I can still have the windows rolled down. I don't know why I rolled them up. I don't have to turn my AC on. Hold on. There's no way to be ready. Oh fuck, now I'm stressed out. Okay. I'll go back a little bit. When she had stolen the lock from her father all those months ago, she had not known, had not understood the true depth of its power, still did not know why he had forged it, only that once, just once, could the lock's power be wielded, and that power, that mighty shattering power, it had saved them all. Gavin, sprawled and bloody behind her, stirred. His face was so mangled she could barely see the handsome, fierce features beneath. His left arm was useless at his side, the price of distracting Erwin while she'd unleashed the lock's power. But even Gavin had not known what she'd been planning, what she'd stolen and harbored all these months. She did not regret it, not when it had spared him from death. Worse, Gavin took in the sarcophagus, the empty, intricate amulet of the lock in her palm as it rested on her thigh. He recognized it instantly, having seen it around her father's neck during those initial weeks in Orinth. The blue stone in its center was now drained, dim where it had once flickered with inner fire, barely a drop of its power left, if that. "What have you done?" His voice was a broken rasp from screaming during Erwin's ministrations. To buy her time, to save their people, Elena folded her fingers into a fist around the lock. "He's sealed. He cannot escape. Your father's lock, it is done," she said, shifting her attention to the dozen ancient immortal figures now on the other side of the sarcophagus. Gavin started, hissing at his broken body with a sudden movement. They had no forms. They were only figments of light and shadow, wind and rain, song and memory, each individual and yet a part of one majority, one consciousness. They were all gazing at the broken lock in her hands, its stone dull. Gavin lowered his brow to the blood-soaked rock and averted his eyes. Elena's very bones quailed in their presence, but she kept her chin high. "Our sister's bloodline has betrayed us," said one that was of sea and sky and storms. Elena shook her head, trying to swallow, failing. I saved us. I stopped Erwin. Fool, said the one of many shifting voices, both animal and human. Half-breed fool. Did you not consider why your father carried it? Why he bided his time all these years, gathering his strength? He was to wield it, to seal the 3 word keys back into the gate and send us home before he shut the gate forever. Us and the Dark King. The lock was forged for us, promised to us, and you wasted it. Elena braced a hand on the earth to keep from swaying. My father bears the word keys? He had never so much as hinted. And the lock. She had thought it a mere weapon, a weapon he had refused to wield in this bloody war. They did not answer, their silence confirmation enough. A small, broken noise came out of her throat. Elena breathed. I'm sorry. Their rage rattled her bones, threatened to stop her heart dead in her chest. The one of flame and light and ashes seemed to withhold, seemed to pause in her wrath, to remember. She had not seen or spoken to her mother since she had left her body to forge the lock. Since Fuck that fucking name! Whatever Crochin had helped Mala cast her very essence into it, the mass of its power, contained within the small witch mirror disguised as a blue stone, to be unleashed only once. They had never told Elena why, never said it was anything more than a weapon that her father would one day desperately need to wield. The cost, her mother's mortal body, the life she had wanted for herself with Brandon and their children. It had been 10 years since then. 10 years. Her father had never stopped waiting for Mala to return, hoping he'd see her again, just once. I will not remember you, Mala had said to them all before she had given herself to the lock's forging, and yet there she was, pausing as if she remembered. Mother, Elena whispered, a broken plea. Mala, Lightbringer, looked away from her. The one who saw all with wise, calm eyes said, Unleash him. So we have been betrayed by these earth beasts. Let us return the favor. Unleash the Dark King from his coffin. No, Elena pleaded, rising from her knees. Please, please, tell me what I must do to atone, but please do not unleash him. I beg you. He will rise again one day, said the one of darkness and death. He will awaken. You have wasted our luck on a fool's errand, when you could have solved all, had you only the patience and wits to understand. Then let him awaken, Elena begged, her voice breaking. Let someone else inherit this war, someone better prepared. Coward, said the one with a voice of steel and shields and arrows. Coward to shove the burden to another. Please, Elena said. I will give you anything, but not that. As one, they looked to Gavin. No. It was her mother who said, We've waited this long to return home. We may wait a little longer. Watch over this place a little longer. Not just gods, but being of a higher, different existence, for whom time was fluid, and bodies were things to be shifted and molded, who could exist in multiple places, spread themselves wide like nets being thrown. They were as mighty and vast and eternal as a human was to a mayfly. They had not been born in this world, perhaps had become trapped here after wandering through a word gate, and they had struck some bargain with her father, with Mala, to at least send them home, banishing Erwin with them. Sorry, and she had ruined it. Rhiannon? Okay. The one with 3 faces said, We will wait, but there must be a price and a promise. Name it, Elena said. If they took Gavin, she'd follow. She was not the heir to her father's throne. It didn't matter if she walked out of this mountain pass. She wasn't entirely certain she could bear to see him again, not after her arrogance and pride and self-righteousness. Brandon had begged her to listen, to wait. She had instead stolen the lock from him and run with Gavin into the night, desperate to save these lands. The one with 3 faces studied her. Mala's bloodline shall bleed again to forge the lock anew, and you will lead them, a lamb to slaughter. There's no fucking way. To pay the price of this choice you made to waste its power here for this petty battle. You will show this future's... I don't know how to say that, sorry. How to forge a new lock with Mala's gifts. How to then use it to wield the keys and send us home. Our original bargain still holds. We will take the Dark King with us, tear him apart in our own world, where he will be but dust and memory. When we are gone, you will show this... Sion? I don't know, how to seal the gate behind us, the lock holding it intact eternally, by yielding every last drop of their life force, as your father was prepared to do when the time was right. Please, Elena breathed. The three-faced one said, tell Brannon of the wildfire what occurred here. Tell him the price his bloodline shall one day pay. Tell him to ready for it. She let the words, the damnation, sink in. I will, she whispered. But they were gone. There was only a lingering warmth, as if a beam of sunlight had brushed her cheek. Gavin lifted his head. What have you done? He asked again. What have you given them? Did you not hear it? Only you. He rasped, his face so horribly pale. No others. She stared at the sarcophagus before them. Its black stone rooted to the earth of the pass, immovable. They would have to build something around it, to hide it, protect it, Elena said. The price will be paid. Later. Tell me. His swollen, split lips could barely form the words. Since she had already damned herself, damned her bloodline, she figured there was nothing left to lose in lying. Not this one time. This last time. Erwin will awaken again. One day. When the time comes, I will help those who must fight him. His eyes were wary. Can you walk? She asked, extending a hand to help him rise. The rising sun cast the black mountains in gold and red. She had no doubt the valley behind was bathed in the latter. Gavin released his grip, the finger still broken from where it had rested on Damaris's hilt, but he did not take her offered hand, and he did not tell her what he'd detected while he touched the sword of truth, what lies he'd sensed and unraveled. They never spoke of them again. You're telling me this whole time, Aelin has been working toward her own death? Because of something she literally had no part in, that she couldn't control, that's not her fault. She now has to pay the price of her life because this fucking bitch, Elena, didn't have the patience to wait. You know, I always wondered, because whenever I would read chapters with, like, Elena in them, I would always see a lot of people be like, I fucking hate Elena. I can't stand her. Da-da-da-da-da. And I was always like, what the hell does she do? Like, I thought she was trying to help. God damn! Moonrise at the Temple of Sandrian, the Stone Marshes. The Princess of Ilvi had been wandering the Stone Marshes for weeks, searching for answers to riddles posed 1,000 years ago, answers that might save her doomed kingdom. Keys and gates and locks, portals and pits and prophecies. That was what the princess murmured to herself in the weeks she'd been stalking through the marshes alone, hunting to keep herself alive, fighting the beasts of teeth and venom when necessary, reading the stars for entertainment. So when the princess at last reached the temple, when she stood before the stone altar and the chest that was the light twin to the dark one beneath Morath, she at last appeared. "You're Nehemiah," she said. The princess whirled, her hunting leathers stained and damp, the gold tips on her braided hair clinking. An assessing look with eyes that were too old for barely 18, eyes that had stared long into the darkness between the stars and yearned to know its secrets. "And you are Elena." Elena nodded. "Why have you come?" The Princess of Ilwi jerked her elegant chin toward the stone chest. Am I not called to open it? To learn how to save us and to pay the price?" "No," Elena said quietly. "Not you. Not in this way." The tightening of her lips was the only sign of the princess's displeasure. "Then in what way, lady, am I required to bleed?" She had been watching and waiting and paying for her choices for so long, too long. And now that darkness had fallen, now a new sun would rise, must rise. "It is in Mala's bloodline that will pay, not your own." Her back stiffened. "You've not answered my question." Elena wished she could hold back the words, keep them locked up, but this was the price for her kingdom, her people, the price for these people, this kingdom and others. "In the north, 2 branches flow from Mala, one to the Havilard house, where its prince with my mate's eyes possesses my raw magic and her brute power. The other branch flows through the Galathinius house, where it bred true, flame and embers and ashes." "Aelin Galathinius is dead," Nehemiah said. "Not dead. No, she'd ensured that. Still paying for what she'd done that wintry night. Just hiding. Forgotten by a world grateful to see such a power extinguished before it matured. Where is she? And how does this tie to me, lady? You are versed in the history, in the players and the stakes. You know the word marks and how to wield them. You misread the riddles, thinking it was you who must come here, to this place. This mirror is not the lock. It is a pool of memory, forged by myself, my father, and Rhiannon Crochin, forged so the heir of this burden might understand one day, know everything before deciding. This encounter, too, shall be held in it, but you were called, so we might meet." That wise young face waited. "Go north, princess," Elena said. "Go into your enemy's household. Make the contacts, get the invitation, do what you must, but get to your enemy's house. The 2 bloodlines will converge there. Already they are on their way. Aelin Galathinius is headed to Ardalan? Not Aelin. Not with that name, that crown. Know her by her eyes, turquoise with a core of gold. Know her by the mark on her brow, the bastard's mark, the mark of Brannon. Guide her. Help her. She will need you. And the price?" Elena hated them then, hated the god.